So let me just remind people that in 2021, Hayat al-Tahrir al-Sham, the terrorist group that is trying to invade Syria and overthrow Bashar al-Assad, is a proxy of Turkey. And at one point in time, they were planning on creating government councils in Syria that would have been linked to the Turkish government. And America is going to enable the expansion of Turkish power. That's what it is. That's what this is all about. Russia is very powerful. And so if Turkey wants to revive its empire, Russia will be a hindrance. If Turkey, let's say, wants to control Syria, Russia's going to be there. If Turkey wants to control, let's say, the Black Sea, Russia's going to be there. If Turkey wants to, let's say, be in a competition with Iran, that's a Russian ally. Russia's going to be there. If Turkey wants to control, let's say, the Mediterranean, well, Mediterranean is a very important maritime region. Russia's going to be there. So Russia, it's the same reason why Germany went to war against Russia in World War I and in World War II. Russia's always been that big obstacle in Europe, in the Middle East, in the Mediterranean, if you want to make your own empire. So these are Turkish proxies. The Caesars need to rule again. Well, that's not going to happen. We're not going to end up with Caesars. We're going to end up with Hitlers. What's going on in Syria? Well, that's a great question. Let's get right into it, guys. Let's get into Syria. We're going to talk about Syria. I got a lot of tabs here open, and we're going to get right into this topic. It's a very nightmarish topic. I hate it. I hate the fact that this whole thing, this whole nightmare, this quagmire in Syria is taking place, because I know what the end result is going to be. Guys, it's very simple. I want to make sure my Christmas lights are on. It's very simple. It's not that complicated. You don't have to go to school in Washington, D.C. and pay a whole bunch of money to some CIA agent to tell you about what's happening. It's a proxy war between Russia and Turkey, ultimately between Russia and NATO. NATO is backing the rebels. Russia is supporting the Syrian government, albeit Russia is not doing a very good job in supporting the Syrian government. And people are going to say, well, it's because Russia can't spread itself out too thinly, because right now it's dealing with a war in Ukraine, and I agree. That makes sense. So it's a proxy war, everyone. There's nothing really complicated about what's happening. It's not that difficult to understand. Turkey is backing the rebels, and Israel wants the rebels to topple Bashar al-Assad, but Israel doesn't want the rebels to go past the Golan or to go to the Golan Heights. But if the rebels can just kill Bashar al-Assad, Israel doesn't care, because Bashar al-Assad is an enemy of Israel, and these rebels could rape Bashar al-Assad's wife. The Israelis aren't going to care. The Americans aren't going to care. It's very evil what we are currently witnessing. These rebels, these people, they call themselves Hayat Tahrir al-Shams or something like that. They're basically just ISIS, but they're a lot more intelligent than ISIS, because they're saying that we're going to be more diplomatic. We want to make ourselves into a more legitimate force, into a more legitimate revolutionary organization. And so in doing this, they're saying that we're not going to kill Christians like we did before. So the guys who are running this rebel group, they're telling their people, hey, don't touch Christians. Do not lay a hand on any Christians, because they don't want this negative media publicity about violent rebels. Because that's exactly what happened back in the early days of the Syrian revolution. You see, guys, I'm quite old, and if you're old enough, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We saw this nightmare unfold in 2013, 2012, 2011, back in the early days of the Syrian revolution. The rebels, they rose up. They were armed by the CIA. They were armed by NATO. They were trained by NATO. And the Western world thought, hey, we took out Saddam. We took out Mubarak. We took out Gaddafi. Now let's take out Bashar al-Assad. And they thought they could do it, and they could have done it if it wasn't for the Russians. The Russians got involved in 2015. The Russians said, okay, Bashar, you're our guy. We got your back. And the Russians fought against ISIS. Now, I understand that American forces also fought against ISIS, but Russia did help Bashar al-Assad stay in power. That is a fact. But now Russia is occupied with Ukraine. Hezbollah is sending soldiers into Syria to support Bashar al-Assad, but from what I have read, Hezbollah also has been wounded by its recent war with Israel. So things are not looking good for Bashar al-Assad, and my fear is that Syria is going to turn into another nightmare. It's going to turn into another nightmare, and Turkey sees the writing on the wall. Turkey says, okay, Trump is going to get into office soon. Trump is an isolationist, and we know that America is going to back us. So Turkey has been supporting the rebels. In fact, these rebels would not even have stood a chance going against Bashar al-Assad if it wasn't for Turkey's help. Turkey has been helping them greatly, giving them training, giving them weapons, tanks, drones, the whole thing. So Turkey is backing this whole thing. What's Turkey's end game here? It's very simple. Turkey wants to control Syria. Turkey wants to expand into Syria, and it wants to intensify its policy of Turkification. For years, Turkey has been undergoing a policy, conducting a policy of Turkification in northern Syria, in regions like Afrin. Turkey has also been persecuting the Kurds, raping, killing Kurdish people, kidnapping Kurdish people, and this has been done by both Turkish occupying forces and also rebels who are being backed by Turkey, basically Turkey's mercenary army. And there are tons of them. Tons of them. So let's get into this, guys. We got a whole bunch of articles to go through here. This is going to be a long-ass stream, and I prepared for a long-ass stream. And here we go. Let's do it. So we're going to start out with the New York Times. New York Times came out with an article today. Syrian rebels push south despite efforts to slow them. And so right now, the focus is on Homs. So the rebels took Aleppo without really any problems, without much resistance. And the rebels recently took Hama, so now they want to take Homs. Now, the Syrians are saying that they withdrew from Hama because they want to concentrate most of their forces in Homs. That's what they want to do. And Homs is a very important city for Syria, economically speaking. And so the Syrian government has put a priority on, has made Homs into a priority region to defend. The Syrians have also said that they left Hama because they don't want to have to do airstrikes on civilian targets, or on civilians in Hama, not civilian targets, but on civilians, because they would have to do airstrikes in a city in such a case, and that would definitely lead to civilian deaths. Of course, you have other people who say that that's just a excuse, and that Syria has really placed a priority on Homs. So from what I have read, the strategy is that the rebels are going to head towards Homs, and they already are, and then the Syrians are going to proceed to bomb them as they start coming towards Homs. Will this work? We have yet to find out. Now, before people start saying things like, well, Bashar al-Assad's he's gonna get killed or something like that, keep in mind that the Syrian military is a lot bigger than the rebel forces, regardless of how armed the rebel forces are. Just keep this in mind, because this may play out differently than how people expect, but this is going to end either in several different ways. One is that Bashar al-Assad ends up like Gaddafi. Secondly, or the second possibility is that Bashar al-Assad is just going to fight like hell, and this war is going to last a long time. But there is another possibility, and this one is quite scary, and that is that Turkey, seeing that its proxies are not doing that well, will execute a direct conflict in which it would deploy its own troops into Syria. And in such a case, there would be a direct conflict between the Syrian military and the Turkish military, and then it would be a full-out war between Turkey and Syria. And that is a possibility. We may actually see that. Because the rebels by themselves would have difficulty actually just doing the war by themselves on their own. Now, if they can get help from Turkey directly, that would change the whole game. And such a situation would be similar to what happened in Libya back in 2012, where you did have these NATO-backed rebels, and then NATO provided airstrikes to provide air support for the rebels, and that is what enabled the rebels to not only overthrow Gaddafi, but capture and sodomize him. And that's what they did. They actually sodomized Gaddafi. It was pretty evil what they did. I hate those bastards. I absolutely hate the rebels. I think the rebels are scoundrels. And I hate the people who back them up even more. We'll get more into that, but I don't want to stall this article, so let's get into this. The Syrian military is scrambling to block the rapid southward advance of anti-government rebels by trying to cut off the road that connects the major cities of Hama and Homs. As I said, this is the Syrian strategy. The Syrian rebels captured the central city of Hama on Thursday after government forces withdrew, prompting the military to try to slow the insurgents by erecting earth berms and carrying out airstrikes on a major highway to the south. The forces of the Syrian president Bashar al-Assad also have withdrawn from other parts of the country that they control in the northeast and east, according to the Monitor. They are reinforcing the most crucial areas for the survival of the Syrian government and its allies, like Homs, the capital, Damascus, and the coastal area. So they're putting more priority on places like Homs and the capital city of Damascus. And so I guess what the Syrian military is strategizing is that they could maybe put the rebels in a bottleneck situation where the rebels are concentrated into one area, and then they could just take them out more easily. The rebels are like cartel sicarios? Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. See, that's the thing, is that the Syrian military isn't a bad military from what I've seen. And the Syrian military is a hell of a lot larger than the rebel force. So the question is, how the hell is the rebel force going to successfully defeat the Syrian military on its own? How is that going to happen? Unless it gets serious help from a powerful external entity. That's why I say I would not be surprised to see one day Turkey directly getting involved in this conflict. I don't see America getting directly involved in this conflict because right now we're in the Trump era. And Trump wanted to pull out all the troops when he was first president. When he was the president back in the 2010s, he wanted to pull out all U.S. troops from Syria, and it didn't happen. But he wanted to pull out all U.S. troops, and I think he's going to try to do it again in his second term. That's what I suspect. And RFK has already stated that this is one of Trump's intentions for his presidency, is to pull out all of the hundreds of troops that are currently stationed in Syria. And also, there are Turkish soldiers already in Syria. They've been in Syria for years. They've been in northern Syria for years, and Aleppo is in northern Syria. So then what's going to happen? What's going to happen is there going to be a situation where a Turkish soldier is attacked, or Turkish soldiers or a Turkish military base is attacked, and then the Turks are going to blame the Syrians? Now remember, the Turks have been known to conspire and to, well, not conspire. Conspire does fit here, but there's a better word. To contrive terrorist attacks or contrive attacks to blame them on the Syrian government. They've actually contrived such ideas. They have conspired to do such ideas. So, for example, there was a case where, and I remember reporting on this back in 2014, the Turkish government had a little meeting, and a bunch of Turkish politicians got together, and they talked about doing a false flag attack, or allowing for an ISIS attack in Syria so that Turkey would have an excuse to enter Syria. And they talked about this tomb in Syria. It's the tomb of some famous Sufi mystic. And they said, well, allow the rebels to attack the tomb or something, and then we'll have a green light to enter Syria, and then we'll allow ISIS to do its thing in Syria so we can have a green light to enter. I mean, and this conversation leaked out. It was not supposed to leak out, but that conversation leaked out. I want to say it was back in 2013 or 2014. I don't remember. And then I remember reading about how, what was it? The Turks were talking about contriving an attack and then blaming it on the Syrians. I mean, there have been cases where the Turks have conspired such ideas, have thought up such ideas, so they can have an excuse to go to war with Syria. So Turkey is not this innocent country. Turkey started getting involved in the revolution in the earliest days of the revolution, and the Turks have said, well, the reason why they got involved in this was because Bashar al-Assad was attacking civilians. This is what the Turks said. And that is a bunch of bullshit. That's garbage, and everyone knows that is garbage. And anyone who would come out and say that Turkey is doing this all in good faith is a bunch of garbage. It's full of shit, really, because Turkey backed a proxy war in Nagorno-Karabakh in 2020, and the Azeri government slaughtered civilians, and the Azeri government began to do a policy of ethnic cleansing in Nagorno-Karabakh. And I didn't hear Erdogan condemning Azerbaijan. It's a bunch of garbage. Turkey wants to revive its power in the region. Turkey wants to take natural resources in Syria. In fact, Turkey has already been taking natural resources in Syria because Turkey's proxies have been stealing olive oil produced by the Kurds. Turkey's proxies have been stealing olives produced on the farmland ran by the Kurds, owned by Kurdish people. There has been immense thievery that has been done by Turkey in northern Syria. And there also has been ethnic cleansing done in northern Syria, where Kurds have been pushed out of their homes, and then those homes are now inhabited by Syrian Turkmen, who the Turks see as their kinsmen. And the Turks are doing they're doing in Syria what they want to do in Crimea, because Syria does have a Turkmen population, Iraq has a Turkmen population, and so Turkey says, okay, well, we have to go help the Turkmen. So they're in Syria claiming that they're there to help the Turkmen. And the Russians took Crimea in 2014, and Erdogan, what did he do? He went down there to Crimea, and he hung out with the Tatars, and the Turkish government hung out. The Turkish government began to do really conspiracies with the Tatars, the Turkic peoples in Crimea. And so the Turks, they also want to use the Crimean Tatars as a proxy against the Russians. That's also part of the plan. So Turkey has its imperialistic, expansionistic agenda. And it's all very obvious. Very obvious. So it says here that the Syrian rebels captured the central city of Hama in Turkey. We already read this. The forces of the Syrian president, Bashar al-Assad, also have withdrawn from other parts of the country that they control in the northeast and east, according to the Monitor. They are reinforcing the most crucial areas for the survival of the Syrian government and its allies, like Homs, the capital Damascus, etc. Homs lies at the heart of a critical land corridor that runs from Lebanon to Iran, which serves as a pipeline used by Tehran to send weapons, supplies, and people to Hezbollah. So this is very interesting. So Homs lies at the heart of a critical land corridor that runs from Lebanon to Iran, which serves as a pipeline used by Tehran to send weapons, supplies, and people to Hezbollah. And so what happened days before this massive revolution began to take place, or just about, I don't know, maybe a day after this revolution began to take place, this wave of rebel violence began to take place, the Israeli government made a warning to Bashar al-Assad, saying, Bashar, you're going to pay the price for supporting Hezbollah. And Israel did a strike on Syria, saying, well, that their excuse was that they're trying to fight against Hezbollah in Syria. And then, in the midst of all this, you have this whole situation where what? You have this revolution taking place against Bashar al-Assad. So this is really a conspiracy that's being done by Turkey, but also I suspect Israel has a hand in this because Israel's right next door to Syria, and the rebels are doing exactly what Israel wants. Israel wants Assad toppled. The rebels want Assad toppled. The rebels want to fight Hezbollah, and Israel wants for the same thing. So Israel, I suspect, now I've never seen any direct evidence for this, but I suspect Israel has a hand in this. So it says here, throughout the civil war, the Syrian regime has relied on Iran and Hezbollah in addition to Russia to fight the rebel efforts to oust it from power, but they have been weakened or distracted by their own wars. Everyone knows this to be true. Russia is busy with Ukraine, everyone knows this, and Hezbollah was recently really defeated by Israel. Despite the effort to stem their advance, the rebels on Friday continued their push south toward the city of Homs, about 30 miles south of Hama. On Friday, the Syrian military struck rebels and their vehicles both north and south of the city of Hama. Dozens of opposition fighters were killed and wounded. So the Syrian military is obviously better than the rebels. I mean, that's from what I have seen, from what I understand. That's not to say that these rebels are not a threat. They certainly are. But again, the Syrian military is a lot bigger than the rebels. It's a lot larger than the rebel force. So how is this rebel force going to be able to, completely defeat the Syrian military by itself? I suspect that these rebels are going to need some sort of, well, they definitely do need some external support. But if they expect that these rebels are going to just defeat Bashar al-Assad by themselves, well, I don't think that could happen. I think some kind of external force will have to enter to help the rebels. It's never been so over, right? Yeah. Good evening. Hello, Nastia. Privet. The Syrian military issued an unusual statement explaining its pullback, saying that it was seeking to avoid battles inside the city that would endanger civilians. But the Assad government has other considerations. Sacrificing Hama will enable the Assad government to shift its limited military resources and forces to the areas it regards as more important, at a time when its allies, Hezbollah, Iran, and Russia, are weakened or distracted by their own wars. Early on Friday, the Israeli military carried out airstrikes on what it said were routes used by Hezbollah to smuggle weapons near a Syrian government border crossing on its Lebanese border. The Syrian government said the Israeli strike hit the bridge connecting the two countries and put it out of service, according to state media. So, rebels want to defeat Hezbollah. Israel wants to defeat Hezbollah. America wants to defeat Hezbollah. America wants to weaken Iran. That's why it wants to overthrow Bashar al-Assad. It's very, very simple what's happening here, guys. This is all NATO getting involved in this stuff. This is NATO supporting rebels. This is NATO supporting psychopaths. This is NATO supporting these Islamist lunatics. And it's amazing. For years, Israel has said that they are at the forefront of the war on terror. The war on terror. Why the hell isn't Israel helping Syria? Seriously, for years they've been saying, well, Israel's at the front line in the war on terror. Israel's at the front line in fighting terrorism. If Israel loses, the terrorists are going to be at your front door. Apparently, if Israel loses, the terrorists are going to be hanging out in Syria trying to take over that country. So why isn't Israel helping Bashar al-Assad? You don't think those Hayat Tahrir al-Shams guy wouldn't mind beheading Israelis? You don't think those people wouldn't mind killing Jews? But Israel has no issue with these rebels, this revolution. as long as the rebels stay away from Israel. That's the bottom line. But are they going to stop at Are they going to stop at Syria is the question. If they take over Syria, are they going to stop at Syria? And the thing about these rebels is that the rebels are being backed by Turkey. This is Turkey's army. This is Turkey's military army, mercenary army. So if Bashar al-Assad gets overthrown, that's a victory for Turkey, just like Armenia. Guys, this is much larger than Syria. This is much larger than Syria. This is not just about Syria. This is about the revival of Ottoman power. This is a transcontinental problem because the Turks are involved in the South Caucasus. They're involved in North Africa. They're involved in the Eastern Mediterranean. They are a threat to Greece. They are a threat to Cyprus. They are a threat to Israel, although Israel is acting like that's not a thing, but it is. And Turkey is also in competition with Iran, although they may become buddies against the Jews. Who knows? We have yet to see. But if these rebels succeed, it'll be a victory for Turkey, just like Armenia getting defeated in Nagorno-Karabakh was a victory for Turkey. And I remember after the Armenians lost in Nagorno-Karabakh, Russia came out and said this is a victory for the Turks. It's not really a victory for Azerbaijan. I mean, it is a victory for Azerbaijan, but ultimately this is a Turkish victory. And the Azeris consider themselves Turks anyway, so it really doesn't matter. And so if Assad is overthrown and he ends up being another Gaddafi, well, what's going to happen? You're going to have a Turkish victory in Syria. Turkey will put its puppet in that country, and Turkey will expand its military presence in that country. I could be wrong, but I do not see a Syrian victory. I do not see a Syrian victory, a Syrian rebel victory. I do not see a Syrian rebel victory without a external power helping the rebels. It's impossible. Because the Syrians have an air force, they have air support, they got air power, they have tanks. Plus, Syria has the support of Iran, has the support of Hezbollah. Now, they're saying that Iran is not really going to help Syria that much. I am not sure if that's really true because, from what I have read, Iran has been sending some military advisors into Syria. It looks like Iran has a huge stake in this. Iran has a lot of interest in Syria because, well, from Syria you have access into what? You have access into Iraq. From Syria you have a direct access into Israel. You can strike Israel from Syria. So Syria is a pretty big deal for Iran, and again, I could be wrong, but I do not see Iran just saying, okay, you can do whatever you want. I do see Iran getting involved in this. Could be wrong. But the thing about geopolitics, the thing about politics in general, is that when you make predictions, you always put yourself at risk at having egg on your face. Israel announced they might go into Syria. Could you send a link into this, please? Now, because what I read is that Israel is talking about putting troops on the Golan Heights to make sure that none of the terrorists, none of the rebels get into Israel, because Israel's not stupid. Israel knows that the rebels wouldn't mind turning on the Jews if the opportunity came. But Israel likes the idea, or likes the fact, that you have rebels in Syria wanting to overthrow the government there. And as long as the rebels are in Syria and they're butchering the Alawis and they're butchering Assad's people, those rebels could slaughter Christians. Israel wouldn't give a damn. Those rebels could be doing mass rapes. Israel wouldn't give a damn, because Israel has been... This is why oh, God. All this bullshit we were fed, us millennials. Hot damn, man. Hot damn, the boomers. They were just feeding us bullshit all the time. Israel is at the forefront of the war on terror. If Israel lose, then everything will go down. The terrorists will be at our doorstep, everyone. Okay, why aren't they helping Bashar al-Assad fight terrorists? Why aren't they helping them? Why aren't they saying, you know what, we got to go help our Semitic brethren over there in Syria? Because these terrorists, if Bashar al-Assad loses, The terrorists are really going to be at the door of Israel. Like, that's the bottom line. The terrorists are going to be at the door of Israel. But the Syrian rebels are cunning. You know, they're very conniving. And the new rebel leader, Mr. What's his name? Giuliani. Mr. Giuliani has stated that he wouldn't mind working with Israel to fight against Bashar al-Assad. So the rebels have become a lot more cunning than they were 10 years ago. 10 years ago, they were just slitting Christians' throats, and they were talking about killing all the Christians and establishing Sharia law and forcing Christians to convert to Islam. And there was a lot of that insanity that was going on. And those of us who are old enough to remember back in 2013, 14, and 15, there was a whole lot of Christian killing that was going on in Syria. Especially in 2013 and 14. They were really butchering Christians, trying to force Christians to convert to Islam. And the whole world, see, in the beginning of the Syrian revolution, people thought, oh, wow, this is great. Bashar al-Assad is a tyrant and all this bullshit. And you had, ABC, NBC, all the big alphabet media giants, they were talking against Bashar al-Assad, saying that he was an evil tyrant, he was a mass murderer, and all this stuff, and the rebels were the good guys. Now, say what you want about Bashar al-Assad, you do have thugs who follow Assad, that is indeed a thing. You do have these Syrian nationalists who are thugs, that is a thing. But I would much rather have Bashar al-Assad than the rebels. The rebels are evil, malicious assholes. Hello, Mr. Hanna. Glad you love the show. The rebels are assholes. They're evil. They're demons. And they're just cunning murderers and criminals. And the world woke up fairly quickly in 2013 when they heard about Christians being killed by these rebels. And this was really at the beginning of the revolution. So the rebels learned from this mistake. You know, they learned from the past, and they said, okay, guys, you know, we were ISIS at one point in time. You know, HTS, they were connected to ISIS back in the day. They do have roots in Al-Qaeda, and they said, we learned from the past, guys. We just can't go around killing people willy-nilly right out from the get-go. We got to be sophisticated about things. Let's be nice to Israel. Let's be nice to America. Let's be nice to Christians. And so now you have these rebels working to fool the world yet again. And I'm afraid a lot more people are going to fall for it. But I think most people do not give a shit about the Middle East. This is not a priority of any people except for the Syrians. Not even the Israelis care, and they're right next door. And they tell everybody that they are at the forefront, that they are at the front line in the war on terror. That if Israel loses, then the Muslims are going to start invading Europe. And I'm thinking, well, my friend, there are terrorists right next door in Syria, and you guys are laughing about it. So apparently you guys don't give a shit, because you're all full of shit. So no one really cares. This is not a serious issue for most people. This is not a priority issue. Americans do not give a damn. And the last thing that Americans want to hear is that America is going to get involved in Syria. So we're about to head for a Trump presidency. And what's Trump going to do? Trump is going to try to show as best as he can that he does not give a damn about the Middle East. The price of chicken has gone down tremendously in the United States. It used to be $8, $9 for a carton of chicken thighs. Now you can go back to the store and get yourself a nice carton of chicken thighs for $5. And I won't be surprised to see the prices go down to $4 or even $3 for a carton of chicken. And if you could bring the price of chicken down, then the Ottoman Empire could revive and the Turks could resume from where they left off in the Armenian genocide again. Americans aren't going to give a shit. That is just the bottom line. So we're going to go back to the news here. We have a good show today. We have a good crowd. last week's stream was a little bit limp, I'm not going to lie. It was a little bit flaccid, but maybe that's because it was Black Friday. So that's probably the reason. But so far, this stream has been good. I've been enjoying this stream. So we're going to get back to the Syrian situation here. We're going to start looking at this article here. This is from Al Jazeera. Because to be honest with you, Al Jazeera can be a lot more reliable than a lot of these Western media outlets. Because Al Jazeera is a Middle Eastern outlet, and they still see things through a Middle Eastern lens, which is, hey, these rebels may not be that good. Plus, Al Jazeera is an Arab media outlet, and the Arabs, they're always a little bit suspicious of the Turks, given the fact that the Arabs had a whole war with the Turks back in World War I. So, the Arabs can be assholes, but they're not stupid. Thousands flee Syria's home city as opposition forces close in. Fighters led by the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham armed group are near the outskirts of Homs, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. Thousands of people have fled the Syrian city of Homs as anti-government forces push their lightning offensive further south towards Damascus, according to a war monitor. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said on Friday that thousands of Homs residents started fleeing overnight towards the western coast, where embattled Syrian President Bashar al-Assad still maintains control. Why are people fleeing to areas where Bashar al-Assad is in control? I thought that the rebels were the good guys, and why are they going where the government is in control? Because the government's a lot more decent than these rebel demons. And that's the thing that a lot of people don't understand. We'll get more into this, but I do want to make something clear here. What a lot of people don't really understand. Here's the thing. People complain about governments all the time. Government bad. Government is corrupt. Government this. Every government is corrupt. Every government is thuggish to a certain extent. You have to be. Because by definition, the government has a monopoly on violence. If you take away that monopoly, someone else is going to take it. So if you say, okay, the government no longer has a monopoly on violence, then guess what happens? I've talked about this many times. What happens is that different gangs begin to fight over that monopoly on violence. The one that wins is the one who has the monopoly on violence. And then he goes out and he kills his enemies, all right? And he slaughters anyone who's in his way. This gang will slaughter anyone that's in its way. That sort of thing. So people say Bashar al-Assad bad. You know, this is a bunch of bullshit. Yes, they are thugs who are supportive of Bashar al-Assad. Yes, they are pro-Bashar al-Assad people who have done terrible things. At the same time, though, you can find video footage from Syria when things were okay, when life was normal, even during the midst of the civil war. And you see people living in government-controlled areas, government-controlled neighborhoods, and they look fine. You have restaurants, you have people sitting around smoking, people drinking coffee, tea, they're smoking nargila, people go to university, they look fine. Now, you go out to the street and then you talk to the people who hate the government, they're saying everything is bad. Everything bad, man. Bashar al-Assad bad, so bad, and he's fine. He's fine. But then you can find footage from an area that is controlled by the rebels, and you see some woman getting her head blown off because she freaking talked back to a man. So which one do you want to be under? That's the question. It's the same thing with the French Revolution. Monarchy bad, monarchy bad, monarchy bad, bad. People hungry, yeah, revolution. And then you find yourself underneath the blade of a guillotine. So all government is bad to a certain extent. The question is, what do you want? Like, do you want something bad or do you want something worse? There's no such thing as a perfect government. American government is also bad. American government can be corrupt. American government can be whatever, evil, suppressive, in a very small extent, but it can be, yes. But does that mean that you want to be under a bunch of crazy lunatics who worship the Constitution and they think that the Constitution was inspired by the Holy Spirit and they want to kill people in the name of liberty and all this stuff? I mean, you have these lunatics in America, right? You have these militias, these paramilitary groups, and they're crazy. Or a lot of them are crazy, and they wouldn't mind killing people, slaughtering people. So are we just going to prefer those people over the normal life that we have now? And that's the thing. A lot of people are very spoiled, and they think a bad thing is something that justifies them supporting an even worse thing. You see, and that's the problem. You have people in Syria who want Bashar gone, but they're in one of those situations where they should be careful for what they wish for. When this revolution was first happening, there were people saying, "Oh my God, this Bashar al-Assad is so bad." Then they realized that he actually wasn't that bad. It's the same thing with Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein was much worse than Bashar al-Assad. Saddam Hussein was a butcher. But you have two choices here. You can either be under one butcher, Saddam, or you can have a million butchers running around with guns and knives, screaming Allahu Akbar. I mean, which one do you want? It really is that simple. And the ideal choice is obvious. The ideal choice is obvious. So people will say, or the correct choice is obvious. People will say, oh, the rebels are great. Which rebels? Well, the moderate rebels. Which moderate rebels? Where are the moderate rebels? I've never seen these moderate rebels. I've seen plenty of beheading videos from Syria, mass executions, massacres, killing Christians, attacking churches. That's what I saw in the Syrian revolution. Where were these moderate rebels? Where are they? And they said, well, America didn't really help the moderate rebels enough, so the Islamists were the ones who became the most powerful. Why were the Islamists the ones who became the most powerful? Huh? That tells me something about the Syrian revolution. It's not that great if that's the faction that becomes the most powerful. Anyone remember the Russian jet shot down by the Turkish air? Yep, I remember it. Does anyone remember what happened back in February of 2020 when the Russian military bombed the shit out of the Turkish military in Syria and killed literally dozens of Turkish soldiers? I remember that. That was crazy. I'm shocked that didn't cause a war. Trump left Syria in the hands of Russia. Trump left Syria in the hands of Turkey. You can go read about what that CIA guy, Mr. Mike Pompeo, did. He helped the Turks. He backed the Turks, and he talked about a roadmap in which Turkey would enter Syria. And I said this in one of my last streams. Remember, you can see the video on my YouTube channel. I said, you watch, you're going to see the expansion of Turkey under Trump. It's going to happen. That's what I said. Now, if you sit there, oh my God, you guys, some of you guys are delusional. I'm not saying you guys in chat, but some people out there are delusional. Some of you guys want me to walk around with a MAGA shirt and talk about MAGA and praise Trump and how Trump is so great and so amazing and wonderful. Trump is awesome. No, I'm going to give you guys exactly what I think. I think that Trump will be good for America in some ways, but geopolitically speaking, there's going to be a lot of weird shit that's going to happen. Make no mistake about it. There's going to be a lot of weird shit that's going to happen in the next 4 years, geopolitically speaking. In America, too. You have already been seeing the signs about what's going to happen in other countries. We're already seeing Turkey doing its thing in Syria. Right? And Trump hasn't even got into office yet. You're already seeing it. Turkey's backing these rebels. These rebels just took over 2 major cities, Aleppo and Hama. Now they want to take Homs. There's going to be a fierce-ass war. There's going to be some fierce-ass fighting between the Syrian military and the rebels. And a lot of these rebels aren't even Syrian. A lot of them are from, like, Uyghur and different countries, Turkmens from different areas. A lot of these guys are not really Syrian. They're just mercenaries. They're Turkish-backed mercenaries. And so you're already seeing Turkey expanding itself further in Syria. And then Trump's going to take office. What's he going to do? He's not going to tell Turkey hey, Turkey, You better pull back. No, no, no. Turkey is a major member of NATO. This is NATO expanding itself. Did not the Nagorno-Karabakh war happen under Trump? Did we not see Christians being butchered in Nagorno-Karabakh? That happened under Trump. I'm not blaming Trump for it, but it happened under Trump. And that was a crazy event that happened under the Trump administration's watch, because we saw Armenians being butchered by Turks for the first time in a long time. And we saw the bloodthirstiness of the Azeris. We saw how the Turks want to resume from where they left off back in the Armenian genocide. There's a lot of bloodthirstiness there. And so the Turks want to expand their power. We're going to continue to see that expansion. And Trump is going to say, leave that up to them. That's their thing. Who cares? And most Americans are not going to give a shit. They're just going to say that's not our problem. As long as that's over there and not over here, we don't give a damn. But we're going to be seeing a lot of human suffering. I really hate the people who back the rebels. This is what you're dealing with here. So you have these people in NATO who say, we need to support rebels. We gotta help the rebels. So then we help the rebels. And then what do we see? Terrorists with guns, and they're killing Christians, and they're butchering people, and they're raping and killing, and they're pillaging, and all this crazy shit. And then what happens? The same bastards in America, these NATOist bastards, will come out and say, we have a problem with terrorism. It's like, no shit, asshole. You've been backing these terrorists the whole time. What the hell do you expect to happen? I think in fact, I know that a lot of the people who have been running this, anti-Muslim movement are the same people who have been running the neocon movement. They're interconnected. I wrote an entire essay on this. I spent about 3 weeks researching this stuff, and I wrote a very, very long article, and it's about, I want to say 17,000 word essay. I think it's the best article I've ever written. Douglas Murray is a member of Sodom, yes, and people think he's this based guy and everything. The guy is just an old neocon who, he sees the writing on the wall, and he says, okay, look, populism is in. All right, everybody, support populism. Support populism. Populism is great. And then he tries to stoke up the flames of the mob over there in the UK. And that's why you can find an interview. The people will have to be, if the government will not do something about these pro-Palestine activists, the people will have to be involved, and it'll be very, very brutal. I'm pretty certain that Israel was watching Douglas Murray say that, saying, yes, very, very nice. I hate the neocon movement. I think the whole thing is a bunch of garbage. And I think the current day populist movement, much of the racist surge, this right-wing surge that we are currently witnessing, I think it horrendously overlaps with the old guard neocon movement. So it says here that Rami Abdul Rahman, head of the UK-based monitoring group, said fighters led by the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham armed group were 5 kilometers, 3 miles away from the outskirts of Homs city after capturing 2 towns, Rashtan and Talbise, in the governorate of Homs. Homs, a key crossroads city linking Damascus to al-Assad's coastal heartlands, is 46 kilometers south of Hama, which HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, and Allied fighters, those are the ones who the U.S. are backing, captured on Thursday, days after seizing the country's prize city, Aleppo, from government forces. So it says here that Samir Abdel-Jabbar, head of emergency coordination at the UN's World Food Program, said renewed fighting in Syria has displaced about 280,000 people in about a week, warning numbers could swell to 1.5 million. Now, I highlighted this part of the article for a reason. Because, again, the whole thing in the Middle East, it has a ripple effect that affects the politics of the Western world, affects the politics of European countries, and even American politics as well. Because the Syrian migrant crisis is really the catalyst that sparked the current-day right-wing surge that we are witnessing in the Western world. So we have the rise of the right-wing parties in France, in the UK, in Germany, in Austria, in the Netherlands, and these parties are scarily popular. For example, I was reading earlier today that I think Nigel Farage's party, if I remember correctly, Nigel Farage's party is now second most popular party in the UK. Marine Le Pen's party is now the single biggest party in France. She did win the first round of the French election. All of the left-wing parties got together. They made a big political bloc, and they were able to defeat her. But again, they were only able to defeat her by uniting all of their parties together. But if they didn't do that, they would have lost. So it shows you how powerful Marine Le Pen has become. The fact is now she is the single biggest party. The biggest political group in the French parliament is a bloc of several parties, a coalition of a whole bunch of left-wing parties. And they would not have been able to defeat Marine Le Pen's party all alone. They needed to come together. So it really goes to show how popular the far right is in France. And Germany, I've talked about this before, AfD it's now being said that the AfD is the second most popular party in Germany. Netherlands, you have Geert Wilders. So all of these parties have grown in immense popularity. What helped them? What helped them boom in popularity? What helped to bolster up their position? It had to do with the Syrian migrant crisis. What happened in 2015 with the Syrian migrants entering Germany, entering Turkey, and it caused this whole anti-Syrian surge, and it also sparked this immense wave of right-wing politics and this immense wave of popularity for right-wing politics, and nationalism really began to see a revival. 2014-15, especially in 2017, but now it's even bigger. And so a lot of this had to do with the Syrian migrant crisis. So now we see fighting being resumed in Syria, and they're saying that already hundreds of thousands of people have been displaced, and now they're saying that over 1 million people could end up getting displaced. This could very likely cause another migrant crisis in the region. Syrians are gonna try to go to different countries. They're going to try to go into European countries. They're going to try to go into Turkey. And the thing is that everywhere where the Syrian migrants go, they get hated for the most part, from what I understand. They get hated everywhere they go. I mean, they're hated in France, they're hated in Germany, they're hated in the Netherlands, they're hated all over the place. And they are hated in Turkey as well. I mean, people think, well, how come they don't go to Muslim countries? Well, a lot of them did go to a Muslim country. They went to Turkey, which is predominantly a Muslim country. So they went into Turkey and they got hated over there, and they're still hated. They went over to Lebanon. Lebanon is a predominantly Muslim country, and they're hated in Lebanon. And the anti-Syrian sentiment in Turkey is very large. It's very intense, and probably the most unpopular thing that Erdogan has done in the eyes of his countrymen was to be tolerant towards the Syrian migrants. And the nationalists in Turkey are immensely popular due to the influx of Syrians in Turkey. If you have another wave of Syrian migration, it's only going to increase nationalism. And who knows, you may just see one day in the news stories of Syrian migrants being massacred or forced into concentration camps. It wouldn't surprise me in the least bit. A Syrian army officer told the Reuters news agency that Russian bombing overnight had destroyed the Rastan Bridge along the key M5 highway linking Hama to Homs. They want to protect Homs, so there's a bridge that goes from Hama to Homs. Well, the Russians destroyed it to prevent the rebels from using the bridge to go into Homs from Hama. Meanwhile, Israel launched air attacks on 2 border crossings between Syria and Lebanon, hitting the Syrian side of the Arida and Jusia crossing. So Israel did a airstrike on Syrian territory. So it's quite obvious that what the rebels want, to a certain extent, is what Israel wants, right? The rebels want to topple Bashar al-Assad. The Israelis also want to topple Bashar al-Assad. So it's obvious that the Israelis are supporting this revolution. Again, I don't have any evidence that says, oh, look, Israel gave weapons to the Syrian rebels or whatever. But I do believe that the Israelis have a hand in this, from some degree or to another, I don't know. But I do believe that they do have some kind of hand behind this. At the least, they definitely are rooting for the rebels. As the opposition forces pressed on southwards, rebel military commander Hassan Abdel Ghani stated on Telegram that hundreds of fighters were en route to Homs, while the Syrian Ministry of Defense said the army was targeting terrorist vehicles and gatherings, and Hama governed it with the backing of joint Syrian-Russian warplanes. Again, Israel for years has been telling people that they're on the front line of the war on terror, and yet you see them cheering on the rebels, and you see them really helping the rebels out because the rebels are against Hezbollah. So the Israelis and the rebels overlap in this interest. On Friday, SOHR's Rahman reported that Syrian troops suddenly pulled out of eastern Deir ez-Zur city and its surroundings, with columns of soldiers heading towards Palmyra in central Syria. Now, isn't it interesting? Remember back in the 2010s, the Russians were involved in Palmyra, and the Russians were there to fight ISIS. And remember when all the NATOist media was saying, look how bad the Russians are. They're in Palmyra. They're expanding into Palmyra. This is so terrible. And they were there to fight ISIS. So now we have a repeat of the same bullshit where, look, the rebels are heading towards Palmyra. The Syrian military is heading towards Palmyra. And it looks like there's going to be a fight over Palmyra. And if that happens, well, then all the NATOists are going to say, oh, look how terrible this is. And it's going to be like we're going to be back in, 2017 again. And it says here that oil-rich Deir ez-Zor governorate, which borders Iraq, is split between U.S.-supported Kurdish forces to the east of the Euphrates and Iran-backed Syrian government forces and Iraqi militias to the west. ISIS, sleeper cells are known to be present in the area. So ISIS is still around, but their friends, HTS, Hayat al-Tahrir al-Shams, they're there now. And they're basically just ISIS. But they're feigning friendliness. They're putting up a face of diplomacy and friendliness, and we all know that they're really monsters underneath the mask. Deir ez-Zor area, it's split between the Kurds who are being backed by the U.S. and the Syrians. And then you also have the Iraqis who are allies with the Syrians. The Iraqi Shiite militias, that is. And so what's going to happen if Trump takes... Trump is going to take over, but what's going to happen when Trump takes office? Is he going to back the Kurds? Now remember, when Trump was the president the first time, he turned his back on the Kurds. So is Trump going to help the Kurds? I don't think so. That's why I keep telling you people, you're going to see the expansion of Turkish power under Trump. The city has also seen violence against the Alawite community. So the city of Homs has also seen violence against the Alawite community, with at least 100 people killed in attacks claimed by the Al-Nusra Front. Now, this is very interesting. This is how the Syrian Revolution really began. The Syrian Revolution began because a whole bunch of Sunnis were pissed off that Alawites had financial success. I mean, that's really where a lot of this comes down to. They were mad. They said, well, there's an Alawite government, and then you have all these Alawites who are making money, and we're not making as much money as some of these Alawites are, and so we want revolution because we want to make the money, and we want power. And a lot of this really had to do with religious factionalism. The Alawites are a sect of Islam. They're sort of like Shiites, but they got their own little twist. I'm not exactly sure what the twist is, but apparently there's a twist somewhere there. Because I remember some years ago I said that Alawites were Shiite, and somebody said, they are not Shiite, they're something else. We don't know what they are. Okay, fine, whatever, who cares? So they hated the Alawites because they were successful Alawite businessmen, and then you had Sunnis who were mad. They said, we want the business, we want the success. So they did a revolution. So then you read the news here in Al Jazeera, and they're saying that Alawites are actually getting murdered. Well, of course they're getting murdered, because that's the anger against the Alawites is where a lot of this stuff springs. That's where a lot of this stuff begins. So of course they're going to start killing Alawites. A lot of this has to do with jealousy. It's like when they said, oh, look, the Jews are making money, but we're not making money. So let's go vote for Adolf Hitler so we can kill the Jews and we can take all their stuff. I mean, that's pretty much what it comes down to. A senior Iranian official told Reuters on Friday that Tehran would dispatch missiles and drones to Syria. See, this is why I say I don't think Iran is going to just let this all go. I think Iran is going to have some kind of involvement in this, sending more military advisors and deploying forces to support Bashar al-Assad. We're going to get into some more articles here, but we're going to get more into the Syrian Revolution. I think that's the biggest thing happening right now internationally, is the Syrian Revolution. I did spend some time looking at what's been going on with Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh. I couldn't really find much of anything. And they're talking about how, well, Turkey and Armenia could normalize their relations. And, oh, well, they were saying that bullshit about Bashar al-Assad and Turkey a while back ago. In fact, if you look at my YouTube channel and type in Syria, you will see a video that I did not too long ago. Well, I think I did this video about a year ago, or it was a while back ago, but I did a video some time ago about the talks in regards to Turkey and Syria normalizing relations and all this stuff. And I said in my video, I said, it's a bunch of bullshit, guys. There's going to be no normalization between Turkey and Syria. It's not going to happen. And I was right. And I'm not saying that I'm a genius. Anyone could have made that prediction, because you know why anyone could have made that prediction? Because it's the Middle East. And in the Middle East, there is no such thing as peace. There's only buying time, so you can get weapons and more ammo, so you can kill more people. That's the bottom line. There is no such thing as a ceasefire. That's a bunch of horse shit. I remember when the story about a ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel popped up, and the New York Times had this whole elaborate article on it. They said, oh, what you need to know about the ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel, details about the ceasefire, here, click on this link and you'll read them. And I clicked on the link and I read through a little bit of it and I said, why in the hell am I wasting my time reading about a ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon? We all know that this ceasefire is going to be broken. And yeah, absolutely, it got broken and Israel hit something and Israel said, yeah, because the Hezbollah guys were trying to move some weapons, so we hit them. All right, so the ceasefire was bullshit. So all ceasefires are bullshit. If there's going to be a ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia, that's also going to be bullshit. And so it's all garbage. At the end of the day, this is about territory, power, resources, and money. And that's what Turkey is interested in Syria. That's why you hear about Turkey stealing the olives from the Kurds. They're stealing olive oil from the Kurds. Hell, you have these pro-Turkish lunatics in Syria, these thieves, these thugs, and what are they doing? They're cutting off. They have cut, and we'll get more into this. They have cut down literally hundreds of thousands of olive groves owned by the Kurdish farmers. Yes, absolutely. They have cut down hundreds of thousands of trees, olive trees. You know how much time an olive tree needs to produce olives? You know how much time it takes, how much years of work it takes to take care of an olive tree? So many years of tending to these olive trees, fertilizing them, irrigating them, pruning them, making sure that they're healthy. And these assholes come along and they cut down hundreds of thousands of olive trees that were owned by Kurdish farmers. And what did these bastards do? They sent the trees to Turkey. They cut the trees up and sold them as olive wood. They were selling them as olive wood from Syria, and all of it is stolen from the Kurds. But because Turkey's been doing this, has been doing terrible atrocities in northern Syria for years, and very few people have talked about it. Just as Turkey was responsible for war crimes in Nagorno-Karabakh back in the early 2020s. We're still in the early 2020s. We're about to enter the mid 2020s. Getting old, right? Time flies. But in 2020, there were terrible atrocities that were done by the Azeris, and the Azeris are just an extension of Turkish power in the South Caucasus. So there's a very interesting article that was published by the Middle East Quarterly, and it talks about HTS, Hayat al-Tahrir al-Shams, and how they're getting backed by Turkey. It's a very educational read. It just sucks that the whole world is like this. I completely agree. It's very depressing, guys. Very sad, very depressing. But here we are. We gotta, we're gonna learn about this stuff because it is the sad reality of life. So let's get right into this. I'm gonna increase the size of this article here because it's a little bit too hard to read. There we go. In its quest, so I'm gonna read this here. In its quest to fulfill its expansionist ambitions, Turkey is pursuing a systematic Turkification policy in areas under its control in northern Syria. This takes various forms: demographic, economic, educational, and even the orchestration of environmental extermination. And that's just a fancy way of saying that they're cutting down all the olive trees that are owned by the Kurds, and they're selling the olive wood back in Turkey, and they're also stealing the olive oil that's made by the Kurdish people in Syria. And they are pursuing a policy of Turkification. They want everyone to speak Turkish. They are the Turks, where the Turkish military is in control in northern Syria. They are controlling the entire education system in that area where they are, and they want everyone to learn Turkish, and they have been forcing people for years actually to use the Turkish currency. So really, that area where the Turks have their military has become de facto, effectively, an expansion of Turkish power. I mean, this is just it's the sad reality. It is just the sad reality. So it says here that in its quest to fulfill its expansionist we already read this. So it says here that fundamental to the strategy is the ethnic cleansing of hundreds of thousands of indigenous Kurds and the resettling of Arabs and Turkmen in their place. So they've been throwing the Kurds out, and they've been replacing them with Arabs and Turkmen. Turkey and its proxies provide various essential services for the locals, with the eventual object of linking Syrian cities and towns to Turkish provinces and making their inhabitants completely dependent on Turkey. I'm going to read that again. It's very revealing. Turkey and its proxies provide various essential services for the locals, with the eventual object of linking Syrian cities and towns to Turkish provinces and making their inhabitants completely dependent on Turkey. This is about Turkish expansion, nothing more, nothing less. It is Turkish expansionism. That is what we are seeing. Now, all this nonsense about how Assad is killing Syrian civilians, that's a bunch of bullshit, because Turkey kills civilians. Turkey killed civilians in Nagorno-Karabakh. Turkey kills civilians in Iraq. Turkey kills civilians in Syria. So all this talk about helping the Syrian civilians is a bunch of bullshit, because with their policy, more civilians will be killed. That is the reality. They're going to lead to more civilians being killed in Syria, and the Turks supported the Syrian revolution going back years and years ago, really from the beginning. They were supporting the Syrian revolution, and the Syrian revolution has led to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. So all this talk about helping civilians is a bunch of horse shit, and what the Turks want is power, materials. They want to steal, they want to loot, they want to pillage, they want to rape, they want to kill, they want to enslave. That's the reality. We're dealing with demons here, everybody. These aren't good people. All right, let's read some more. So it says here that in the Turkish-controlled regions in northern and northeastern Syria, which have been subjected to an all-out systematic identity change based on a gradual process of using soft power to solidify Ankara's influence. During the past 5 years, by the way, this article was written in 2021, but it's still very informative. Just keep that in mind when they start bringing up time frames. During the past 5 years, Turkish forces launched 4 military operations that led to the establishment of 4 border zones under their control. The first was Euphrates Shield in August 2016. Funny, that's right before Trump took office. Funny. Isn't that interesting? Trump won in 2016. He entered office in 2017. And so Turkey did its first military operation in Syria right before Trump took office. Isn't that crazy? And then Trump won this last election, and now Turkey's back at it. They're amplifying the situation. They're exasperating the problem in Syria. They're enabling these rebels. They're backing these rebels. They're facilitating the rebels' conquest of territory because they want to take that territory, because they know that Trump is going to be a non-interventionist. That's what they're thinking. They're thinking Trump's going to be a non-interventionist. He gave us a lot of freedom when he was president. This is the time. Let's go. Oh, so it says here, so Operation Euphrates Shield in 2016, which targeted Aleppo's northern countryside. The second, Olive Branch, took control of Aleppo's northwestern countryside in January of 2018. The third, Peace Spring, seized areas east of the Euphrates River in October of 2019. Thank you. These operations focused on Kurdish cities and towns under the pretext of pursuing Syrian Democratic Forces fighters. So they said, well, the Kurds are terrorists. We have to go down there. Again, it's a perfect pretext. Last year, the Turkish army launched Operation Spring Shield in the Idlib government following a military assault by the Syrian regime to regain control over vast areas in the northwest. So the Syrians tried to take control of the territory that was taken from them, and they tried to take control last year, and that didn't work. That assault ended with a ceasefire agreement between Damascus's ally Russia and Turkey in Idlib in March of 2020. Interesting, March of 2020, huh? Right before Trump lost. And they said, okay, guys, let's take a break. Trump's gone. He's leaving. Let's take a break. Let's have a little ceasefire. And then Trump's about to come back, and they said, hey, back in business, boys. The last time the area had peace was when the Ottomans controlled it. We'll tell that to the Armenians. As a result of these actions, Turkey now controls more than 8,000 square kilometers in Syria, or nearly 4.9% of the war-torn country. So Turkey right now controls 4.9, so basically 5%, if you round it off. 5% of Syria is controlled by Turkey. That's not good. They are currently being good to the Christians. They want to do some peace. Yes, exactly. The rebels the rebels learned their lesson from 10 years ago, because 10 years ago when they started doing this, when the Syrian revolution was fairly new, there was a lot of butchering of Christians by the Syrian rebels, and the world said, "No, we're not going to support this." So they want to get the world's favor. So yes, they're being a little bit nicer, but they're not nice at all, these people. I think the Neo-Ottoman Empire would be something this world isn't fully prepared for. Yeah, absolutely. People are not ready for it at all. But the thing is that when the new Ottoman Empire arises, people aren't going to care, because people don't give a shit about what happens in other countries, as long as it's not happening in their own country. And so, yeah, you're right. The world is not ready for it. Now, I will not be surprised when the new Ottoman Empire is amongst us. That's if I'm still alive. But if I am still alive by that point, I will not be surprised at all, because I'm totally expecting it. In fact, all this stuff that we see today going on in Syria with rebels fighting and the Syrian military fighting and Turkey being involved, it's just a continuation of the same thing that we've been seeing since 2013, since 2012, since 2014, 15, 16, 17. It's the continuation of the same damn thing. Turkey wants to expand in Syria. Turkey wants to revive its empire. Turkey wants to take Syria. So it's using these rebels. It's the same damn thing, but it's only getting amplified more and more. And they're talking about Deir al-Zur. The rebels want to take Deir al-Zur. Where did the Armenians get butchered? How do you think the Turks killed the Armenians? You think the Turks just shot everybody? There was that went on. But a lot of the Armenians were killed by starvation. Because what the Turks would do is they would force people into the Syrian desert. In Syria, yes. They would take the Armenians into the Syrian desert, and they would force them to march, and they would make them march and march and march and march. And then as they would make them march, people would drop dead from starvation. Or if you were barely alive, just barely walking, you would get ambushed by cutthroats, criminals. You would get ambushed by Kurds who were fighting for the Ottoman Empire, and they would butcher and rape. And they would make you walk for miles and miles and miles through this endless span of desert. Endless span of desert. Then they would take you to a train station. The Turks had a very sophisticated train station. It was called I think it was called the Berlin-Baghdad Railway. It's basically developed by the Germans. And the Berlin-Baghdad Railway had all these train stations going through the Ottoman Empire. So when they would take these Armenians through the desert, the stopping points were the train stations. So they would take you into a train station, and you weren't fed a nice, hot, warm meal. You were forced into a train station, and you were forced to be in a crowd filled with people. And so everybody's starving, everyone's huddled together, and then you would die. You would die in a train station from starvation, or they would kill you. So the train station was converted essentially into a death camp. That's what it was. And do you know who was watching this the whole time? The Germans. The Germans were watching as the Ottomans systematically butchered people. And do you know who else was looking at all this? Hitler was. Hitler was inspired by what the Ottomans did, and he said, we can do the same thing but more efficiently. So as the Ottomans used the railway system to systematically butcher people, the Germans also used the railway system to systematically exterminate people. So the Germans got the inspiration of using a railway system for the purpose of systematically exterminating people from the Armenian genocide. Hello, Orthochristos. We are here talking in the Theodore Schubot Friday live stream. Of course, we are dealing with the depressing reality of life. And here we are. There is a reason a lot of Armenians live in Syria and Palestine. So there's a lot of Armenians who live in Syria. If the U.S. were to withdraw from all its bases in the Middle East, will the Turks use those bases? I don't know about using those bases, but I do know that if the Americans withdraw from the Middle East, the Turks are just going to refill up. They're going to fill up the vacuum left by the Americans. Glad to join you this beautiful Friday night. Absolutely. Just sit down, kick back, and relax. Enjoy the beginning of the weekend by listening to a complete and total stranger talking about a bunch of depressing details for the next 5 straight hours, everyone. The Caesars need to rule again. Well, that's not going to happen. We're not going to end up with Caesars. We're going to end up with Hitlers. As a result of these actions, okay, they control 4.9%. We got this already. Between 12,000 and 15,000 Turkish soldiers are stationed in Syria. This is of 2021, so maybe the number has changed since then. The major cities under Turkish control are Azaz, Mareya, Al-Bab, Jarablus, Afrin, Ras Al Ain, and the town of Ararai. Ankara has also formed affiliated Syrian militias of some 80,000 to 100,000 fighters. That's a huge army, guys. And these are the rebels that Syria is currently dealing with, these guys. There's a lot of them. Most go by Turkish and Ottoman names, notably Sultan Murad, Mehmet the Conqueror. Now, amazingly, all of these rebel groups are named after Ottoman historical figures or named after some kind of Ottoman detail. Samar Khan Brigade, Suleiman Shah. It's unbelievable. And then there is another one here. It says, and Suleiman Shah, which yielded a group of youth fighters in April of 2019, dubbed Etrugul's grandson. So they even have a little youth army. Turkish military operations displaced between 300,000 and 350,000 Kurdish civilians from their towns and subsequently blocked them from returning. So ethnic cleansing of the Kurdish people by the Turks, just like they did ethnic cleansing in Nagorno-Karabakh. And isn't it interesting? You see all these rebel groups. They're named after Ottoman historical figures like Etrugul, Mehmet the Conqueror, Sultan Murad, and Suleiman Shah. And people are going to sit there and say that the Turks have nothing to do with what's happening in Syria. No, the Turks are saying we have nothing to do with what's going on in Syria. Nothing. But they make it so obvious that they are totally behind what's happening. The Germans did their first genocide in Namibia. That's right. Yep, in Africa, on the Herero and the Namba people. The British used concentration camps against the Boers. That's right. The Nazis were simply a product of their time, and it was a very dark time. So it says here that concurrently, Turkish authorities brought hundreds of thousands of displaced Arab and Turkmen Syrian civilians from the countryside of Damascus, Homs, Hama, Daraa, and Idlib to settle in the Kurdish region, so ethnic cleansing, and then bringing in Turkmen and Arabs to replace the Kurds in the regions that they inhabited. This measure was undertaken based on a Turkish-Russian understanding that had the approval of Iran and the Syrian regime. Now, I underlined this part in red because I found this to be quite interesting. The Turks settled dozens of Turkmen families in villages near the Kurdish city of Afrin, allowing them to seize lands in the Afrin countryside and building 7 model villages to settle additional families of loyalist factions, particularly Turkmen. One of the projects, Basma, is sponsored by the Kuwaiti-backed White Hands Association. It includes a mosque and a Quran memorization center with support from an Arab-Israeli association, Aleish Bakrama. Meanwhile, the so-called Salvation Government, led by Al-Qaeda's former affiliate in Syria, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, that's what Syria is dealing with right now, this is so crazy. See, this is why I made this red. Is reportedly planning to create a civil registry department and local councils linked to Turkey and issue new ID cards in areas under its control in Idlib and its countryside. Okay, I gotta read that again. So HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is the terrorist organization that Assad is fighting currently, was planning back in 2021 to create a civil registry department and local councils linked to Turkey, and they were planning to issue new ID cards in areas under their control. So already in 2021, this is when this was written, HTS was saying, we're going to make councils, local councils in Syria, and they're going to be linked to the Turkish government. And we're going to force everyone to get IDs, and these IDs are going to be connected to our own government. But of course, these people have nothing to do with Turkey. It's very obvious what's happening here. Oh my God. We're seeing the revival of Ottoman power. That's what's happening. This HTS thing, this is the extension of Ottoman power. This is the revival of Ottoman power. And Russia has a lot of interest in Syria. They have a port in Syria. And Russia is spread thin right now because they're dealing with Ukraine. They're dealing with NATO. But Russia has a lot of interest here. And we may just be seeing the beginning stages of a Turkish-Russian war over the Middle East. In a December 2020 circular, the Turkish appointed local council in the Kurdish city of Ras Al Ain in Hasaka Governorate near the Iraqi border called on Iraqis who were said to be residing in the city and its countryside to apply for ID cards. And there are no records documenting the presence of Iraqi inhabitants in the area. It appears, as there are no records documenting the presence of Iraqi inhabitants in the area, it appears that these people settled there with Turkish backing. So like I said, the Turks are doing ethnic cleansing. They've been pushing the Kurds out and then bringing in all these Turkmen to come in to live in those areas that the Kurds were kicked out of, to live in the areas that the Kurds owned. It is noteworthy that most of them are Iraqi Turkmen who fought with terrorist factions across the border, etc., etc. Now this is also very interesting. Ankara has used the Turkestan Islamic Party, an Uyghur Islamic faction grouped in Idlib and considered a terrorist movement, to fight the Kurds. Now, why would Turks work with Uyghurs? Because the Turks have this vision of leading the Turkic world. The Turkic world is what? Turkey, Azerbaijan, Uyghurstan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan. All right, this is all the Turkic world. This is the Turkic world, and they want to lead the Turkic world. So they don't. So that's why they're kicking the Kurds out of their homes. They're bringing Turkmen to live in the homes that were owned by the Kurds. That's why they're bringing in Uyghurs from China to go fight for the Turks, because they had this aspiration to lead the Turkic world. This is why the Turks have their own. They have their own NATO. You can look into this. They have a Turkic NATO. Guess which country is the secretary country for the Turkic NATO? Hungary. Yep. That guy who's running Hungary, Orban, watch out from that guy. He's a snake. Everyone's sitting there saying, Orban, so base, so cool, so nationalist. Orban is a pan-Turkist. Orban believes that the Hungarians and the Turks are related, and they kind of are to a certain extent. That they're related, and he has this vision of helping with the creation of this Turkic NATO. Viktor Orban also supports the idea of a pan-European army led by Germany. Viktor Orban also kisses a lot of Russian ass. So the guy is just a snake. I mean, he's not loyal to anyone. But nonetheless, he does things, or he will support Turkey in the name of pan-Turanianism. The world does not really care about Armenians. That's correct. No one gives a damn about Armenians. They don't. No one gives a shit. In 2020, Armenians were literally being butchered like animals, horrifically, by our allies, Azerbaijan. Oh my God. I remember this guy, what's his name? There was this article that I read years and years ago. Yep, here he is, Michael Rubin. He works for a big neocon organization called the American Enterprise Institute. And years ago, he wrote an article about how Israel should back the Turks against the Armenians because the Armenians are pro-Iran. So we should be backing the Turks. I remember this bullshit. He was saying we need to be backing the Turks so we can fight against the Armenians, because the Armenians are pro-Iran, and Israel needs to be supporting the Azeris to kill off the Armenians because the Armenians are pro-Iran. I'm thinking, aren't you guys all Jews? I thought the Jews care about the Holocaust, remembering the Holocaust. So why do you want to start another Holocaust? And why would you want to kill Armenians when the Armenians suffered a Holocaust? And you guys should be kinsmen. You guys should be saying, us Jews and you Armenians, we both went through a terrible Holocaust. We both went through a genocide. We should be working together against the people who actually denied the Armenian genocide and also denied the Jewish Holocaust as well, because the Turks are very pro-Nazi. But here we have the Jews supporting the Turks who love Adolf Hitler to kill Armenians, a people that went through a genocide that took place before the Jewish Holocaust. So it's just, the whole thing is bullshit. There's a lot of bullshit out there, guys. When asked about Syria developments by Tucker Carlson, Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov mentioned Israel, Britain, and the USA as possible instigators, but left Turkey out. Your take? Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that, but if that's the case, then it's quite obvious as to why Turkey was not mentioned, because Russia wants to maintain diplomacy with Turkey, because Russia cannot afford a conflict with Turkey. Although I think eventually that's going to happen, although I think that it's inevitable, Russia cannot afford a conflict with Turkey right now, because it's quite obvious as to why that is. Russia is in the midst of a war with Ukraine. And so Russia doesn't want to get into a whole spat with the Turks. And that's just the sad reality of it. In Revelation, what is the false prophet and false religion? Who cuts off the heads of apostates and non-believers? Well, you're going to be in for a real surprise when you see Western people butchering other people like chickens in a slaughterhouse. The Muslims don't have the monopoly on violence. Guess what? Hayat al-Tahrir al-Sham were called before. Jabhat al-Nusra. That's right. And Jabhat al-Nusra is no different than ISIS. They're just as bad. Israel doesn't have a concept of right and wrong. It is what is beneficial to their nation versus what is not, and they are justified in acting freely because of the history of the Gentiles killing them, according to their thinking. Well, I'm just amazed that they keep bringing up the Holocaust, and they always talk about never again this and never again that, and they support the Azeris. They support the Azeris butchering the Armenians. The Azeris deny the Armenian genocide. The Turks deny the Armenian genocide. The Turks also, believe it or not, Mein Kampf was once a major bestseller in Turkey. And a lot of the Turks are pro-Hitler, and a lot of the Turks hate Israel and want to destroy Israel, but yet Israel doesn't mind working with those very people to butcher Armenians because the Armenians are friendly with the Iranians. And then they wonder why the Armenians are friendly with the Iranians in the first place. Can you blame them? Look at the people look at the people around them. You have the Azeris who want to butcher you, then you have the Turks who want to butcher you, and Armenia is sandwiched in between these two countries. Of course, Armenia is going to be pro-Iran when the Iranians are not friendly with the Azeris. You can't blame the Armenians for being friendly with the Iranians or being friendly with the Russians. And let's not forget, the Russians did help the Armenians in World War I against the Ottomans. So you can't blame the Armenians for being friendly with the Russians. I mean, the Armenians and the Russians are neighbors. The Armenians and the Iranians are neighbors. And so why wouldn't Armenia be friendly with the Iranians? It doesn't make, it's like saying, you know, I'm right next to Canada or I'm right next to Mexico. Let's be enemies with Mexico. That doesn't make any sense. It's just crazy the types of standards they try to force people to comply with. You have to be enemies of Iran. Well, Iran's right next to us, and Iran's more powerful than we are. We don't care. You have to be enemies with Iran, damn it. We're going to fight Iran to the last Armenian if we have to. And it's absolute insanity. It really is. It's evil. It's just so evil what these neocons do. So evil what these neoliberals do, these NATOists do. They want to force Armenia to be enemies with Iran and to be enemies with Russia, when it was the Russians who helped the Armenians when they were being butchered by the Ottomans. And Iran is not an ally of Azerbaijan, and Azerbaijan wants to butcher the Armenians, and of course the Armenians are going to be friendly with the Iranians. And then you have the Turks who want to butcher the Armenians like chickens in a slaughterhouse. And Why in the hell would Armenia be friendly with the Turks? But that's what America wants. America wants Armenia to be friends with countries that tried to exterminate it, and they want Armenia to be friends with a nation that tried to genocide it. They want Armenia to be enemies with Russia when Russia helped Armenia when it was being genocided. But Americans and these neocons and these Zionists, they don't give a shit about these historical sentiments that are deeply rooted in horrendous human suffering. I mean, they don't give a damn. So it says here, Turkey has also taken steps to wipe out the Syrian identity. Syrians in the Aleppo countryside were instructed to obtain new ID cards that have a special code linked to the civil registry departments in the provinces of Hatay, Kilis, and Gaziantep in southern Turkey. So basically, they want to force them to become subjects of Turkey. And yet you have people saying that the idea of a revived Ottoman Empire is a fantasy, and yet we actually see it being done right before our eyes in real time. It's surreal. So they want to destroy the Syrian identity. They want to Turkify all the people. They want to force them to be subjects of Turkey. Even vehicle registration plates and driver's licenses are now linked to the Turkish system. So this is expansionism. That's what this is. But yet they want to condemn Russia for going into Ukraine. But yet again, America supported Turkey's entry into Syria. This is the dark reality, guys. In addition, Turkey is using the Turkmen minority in Syria to implement its plans. In December of 2012, the Syrian Turkmen Association was established in Istanbul with the aim of creating an organizational structure for them. In March 2013, it was renamed the Syrian Turkmen Assembly during a meeting attended by former Turkish Foreign Minister Ahmet Davutoglu, who stressed in a speech that his country will continue to stand by the Syrian Turkmen under any circumstances. So they're using this Turkmen population to say, okay, we have Turks in Syria, we got to protect them, therefore we're entering Syria. In November 2018, through Ankara's patronage, the assembly organized an event dubbed the Nation Conference in Rai, during which it adopted a flag to indicate that the Turkmen people now have their own symbol and are to be considered a nation. So they gave the Turkmen their own flag, and they said, okay, you guys got your own country. But of course, you're an expansion of Turkey. The assembly bluntly inflates the figures, blah, blah, blah. So this is where it gets into all of the thievery that the Turks have been doing. I underline a bunch of stuff here. We'll read through some of the stuff here. So it says here that one demographic engineering weapon Turkey is using in the region is to cut off the livelihoods of the indigenous Kurdish population in an attempt to push them out. Olive crops constitute the main source of income for Kurds, the majority of whom are farmers, unlike the Arab and Turkmen settlers, who are mostly small traders and craftsmen. Kurdish-backed groups regularly uproot and sell olive trees as firewood in Turkey. So they're stealing all the olive trees owned by the Kurdish farmers, and they're cutting the trees up and selling them as olive wood, firewood. Although it is difficult to calculate the exact number of olive trees in the Kurdish region, most estimates place it at 12 to 18 million trees, which annually produce 60,000 to 70,000 tons of olive oil. A report issued by Human Rights Watch organization Afrin documented the cutting down of more than 314,000 olive trees for firewood trading. My God. There you go. So they're cutting down the trees, they're stealing the oil, the olive oil that is. So they cut down more than and this is of 2021. It's much more than now, I'm going to assume. Cutting down of more than 314,400 olive trees for firewood trading, and noted that more than a third of the area allocated for agriculture had been burned down over the past 3 years. Now, my grandfather, his father lived under Ottoman occupation. to my great-grandfather. And my grandfather told my father that the Ottomans are locusts. He said the Ottomans, the Turks, they're locusts, because everywhere they go, they will destroy all the forests. They will destroy all the greenery. And they will make the land into a desert. That's what my grandfather said. And he learned that from his father, because his father lived under Ottoman occupation. And so you're seeing it in real time. You're seeing that Ottoman behavior of destroying agriculture in real time. By that, soon Turkey will be entering Germany. No, Germany and Turkey are going to be allies. They're going to make a little, an axis of evil, a real axis of evil, not a bullshit one. Shabbat Shalom, Theodore, and to everybody, that's my to God of Israel, Jehovah, and Yeshua will bless to every people. Oh God, who let the crazy house in? I guess the crazy house is allowing people to use Wi-Fi now. We're reaching levels of heresy not even thought possible. I know. The geography of Armenia is terrible. It's stuck in between Turkey and Azerbaijan. Yup, it's a really shitty place to be in. You're getting raped from the back and raped from the front. That's the reality. Look at a map of Armenia. You'll see it. It's sandwiched right in between Turkey and Azerbaijan. What a waste of good olive trees. Yeah, 100% agree. It's very sad. So it says here, the Turkish-backed groups seize a large portion of the Kurds' olive crops by force of arms and sell it to Turkish merchants. At the same time, they prevent Kurdish farmers from selling their oil outside the Turkish-controlled region. So the Kurdish olive farmers are only allowed to sell their olive oil within areas controlled by Turkey. They can't sell, they're not allowed to sell their olive oil outside of that. Without prior permission, that is, causing prices to plummet. The value of the looted oil is $150 to $200 million, a quarter of which goes to the armed groups and their civil administrations in the form of taxes ranging from 10 to 20% in exchange for allowing Kurdish farmers to harvest their olive orchards, which translates to earnings of roughly $15 to $40 million per year. So they're doing mass thievery, and they're saying, okay, you got what? How much olive oil do you have? You have $150 to $200 million worth in olive oil. Okay, we're going to take a cut of that, 15 to 40 million, and you give us that money, and then you'll be allowed to harvest your olives. So it's just extortion, thievery, criminality. There have also been many cases of rape done by Turkey's mercenaries. Many cases of sexual torture. You can look into this yourself. It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare, but the same type of evil was taking place in Nagorno-Karabakh in 2020. So it says here that in November of 2018, Turkmen Agriculture Minister Bekir Bakhtamirli told Parliament that 600 tons of olives had entered the country. He said, "We do not want revenues to fall into PKK hands. We want the revenues from Afrin to come to us. We want the money, damn it. That cash is going to us." Merchants to buy oil from Kurdish farmers operate under the supervision of the armed groups to ensure that they buy it at half price and transport it by trucks. In November 2018, the Turkish newspaper Yeni Safa, known for its hardline support of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, reported that the Turkish Agricultural Credit Cooperatives was helping to sell Afrin's olives internationally, and that the Afrin olive market is worth $200 million annually. It will be brought back to the Syrian people. So again, more thievery. A similar tool of demographic engineering is forced starvation. Since the beginning of 2021, the Turkish authorities have deliberately starved the region by reducing Syria's share of the Euphrates River. So they're controlling the water from the Euphrates River. And this is leading to lands not being irrigated, therefore lands are dying. You're seeing farmland being dehydrated, being dried out, being parched because Turkey is stealing the water. And it says here that the Euphrates River is a major source of drinking water and essential to agriculture and electricity production. A large number of irrigation stations on the banks of the Euphrates on the Syrian side are now out of service, and generating electricity is no longer possible due to the drop in water flow from Turkey from 500 to less than 200 cubic meters per second, a move that affects nearly 2.5 million Syrians. So they're controlling the water. This leads to farmlands not being irrigated. This leads to electricity not being generated as much because water is needed for the production of electricity. These measures violate the agreement between the three riparian countries, Syria, Iraq, and Turkey, and will eventually lead to an environmental catastrophe, etc. At the same time, Turkey and its loyalist groups push the last remaining Kurds to flee by harassing them through kidnappings and ransom demands, tactics that force many to leave out of fear for their families. The human rights organization Afrin report disclosed that approximately 7,343 cases of kidnapping have been documented over the past 3 years. Now, I looked into this myself, and it's true. The Turkish proxies, the mercenaries who are hired by Turkey, they go around raping and murdering people in northern Syria. They kidnap people, they take ransom money, and the whole purpose of this is to, well, they want to do what they want to do. They like to rape, they like to kill, they like to steal, they're evil criminals. But at the same time, the Turkish government wants this to happen because they want to force people out of their homes. So they're making life miserable for people on purpose so as to push them out of their homes so they can ethnically cleanse the land of Kurds. In terms of service and finance, Turkish-controlled regions have become totally dependent on Ankara. Again, Turkish expansion. Turkish expansion. The fact that northern Syria, parts of northern Syria are so dependent on Ankara, which is Turkey, the capital of Turkey, tells us that Turkey controls parts of northern Syria. And the fact that you have HTS expanding in Syria, and HTS is what? A proxy of Turkey, shows us that Turkish expansionism is still going on. It is still a thing. It's happening right before our eyes. And the timing is not coincidental. The fact that they are choosing to expand now, right before Trump wins, tells us that they know, or they at least believe, that Trump is going to give them the green light. Cause a war in Syria, revive friction between Syria and Turkey, get them to fight each other, get Syria to fight the rebels. Turkey's going to say, oh God, look, Syria's killing civilians. Oh my God, Assad is killing civilians. He's so bad. Evil tyrant. Evil tyrant. And what's that going to do? Turkey's going to say, well, we need to help them to fight this evil tyrant. And then Turkish expansionism in the area. That's the whole point. That's the whole point. Syrians are doomed. Well, all the Syrian migrants in different countries are hated. They're hated in Germany, they're hated in Lebanon, they're hated in Turkey. And I think there could be another migrant crisis because of this war. I would be surprised if there is not another migrant crisis because of this war. And if there is another Syrian migrant crisis, that's going to lead to more nationalism. What could happen is you could have waves of Syrians trying to go into other countries, like Turkey or Italy, and then the people of those countries are going to say, look, more hordes of barbarians are coming. They're going to rape our women and kill our people and all this stuff. And then the nationalists will say, you got to vote for us, because if you don't, all these Syrian migrants are going to come into your land. They're going to come into your land. That's what Nigel Farage did. Nigel Farage, under the influence of the political strategist Dominic Cummings, he said, if you don't vote for Brexit, the migrants are going to come. And Boris Johnson did the same thing. And so that's what these nationalists use. So if you have another migrant crisis, then you're going to have more propaganda fodder that's going to help the nationalists rise up even more. And I wouldn't, the fact is that the Lebanese hate the Syrians. They hate the Syrians, and the Syrians are terribly mistreated there. And if you talk to the Lebanese, they say the Syrians cause crime. I wouldn't be surprised to see one day the Lebanese butchering the Syrians, just like they butchered the Palestinians back in 1982 in the Srebrenica massacres. I would not be surprised to see one day the Turks butchering the Syrians within their own borders, because they're going to say, we're fighting the Syrians over there, and now we got Syrians living here. They're the enemy within. We should kill them all. And I wouldn't be surprised to see the Turks butchering the Syrians within their own borders. It's a very sad world we live in, guys. It's a very depressing world we live in. It really is. It's depressing. Life, I think, is one big tragedy. You're born, you try your best to enjoy life, and They are the demons all around you. They're the monsters all around you. You know? The Jewish settlers the Jewish settler movement are also cutting down olive trees. That's correct. They are, and they do that for a reason, because they want to push Palestinians out. You know, and those Jewish settlers, they're evil. They're scoundrels. They really are. So it says here, the General Directorate of Turkish Post provides services in Azaz, Mareya, Al-Bab, Jarablus, Afrin, and Ra'i for Turkish employees and Syrian citizens, as it handles banking, money transfers, shipping, and salaries of teachers. Syrian employees, Turkish soldiers, and local police in Turkish lira, which has become the de facto currency. So I'm going to read that part again, because I don't think I read it well enough. The General Directorate of Turkish Post, or PTT, provides services in Azaz, Mareya, Al-Bab, Jarablus, Afrin, and Ra'i for Turkish employees and Syrian citizens, as it handles banking, money transfers, shipping, and salaries of teachers, Syrian employees, Turkish soldiers, and local police in Turkish lira, which has become the de facto currency. So the de facto currency in these regions controlled by Turkey in northern Syria is not the Syrian currency, it's the Turkish lira. So really, this is just de facto Turkey. I mean, you're not living in Syria. You're living in Turkey. That's the reality. So Turkey has already expanded into Syria. The Turkish government has opened hospitals in Jarablus, blah, blah, blah. Even the appointment of judges and lawyers requires the approval of the Turkish Ministry of Justice, while the Turkish Religious Affairs Directorate took it upon itself to renovate hundreds of mosques. It's Turkey. This is Turkey trying to revive its power, trying to revive the big old Ottoman Empire. At the same time, Syrians in Turkish-controlled areas had to register thousands of companies in Turkey in order to distribute their products. Again, Turkish expansionism. If you have to register if you're living in Syria, but you got to register your company in Turkey so that the company will be allowed to exist legally, you are part of Turkey. You are a subject of the Turkish Empire. Not doing so opens them up to the risk that they will be barred from operating. Guys, the Turkish Empire already exists. This is the beginning stages of the Turkish Empire. It's already here. The Turkish Empire is already here. It's bottom line. You're living in Syria, but there's Turkish soldiers everywhere. Tens of thousands of Turkish soldiers. You have to use Turkish currency. You have to register your business in the Turkish government, under the Turkish government. You're paid with the Turkish lira. Your internet service comes from Turkey. I mean, you're living in Turkey. This is the Turkish Empire. The terms of the Idlib ceasefire agreement signed between Ankara and Moscow last year stipulate that Turkey will maintain a foothold in the government. In practice, this means that Ankara tightly controls the local economy, embarks on huge investment projects in Idlib, and keeps a military presence there. And why did Russia agree to this? Because Russia cannot afford to be in a war with Turkey right now. It just can't. See, people say, well, look, Russia's winning. Yes, and you're right, Russia is winning. But look at what's going on around the areas that Russia controls, or the area where Russian influence is very strong. Look at Armenia. Armenians got butchered. Look at Syria. Syrians are being taken over by the enemies of Russia. Russia does not have the strength to deal with it. And so NATO, we can sit here and say, well, you know that Ukraine can't win. And we can pretend like we're geniuses. But the bottom line is, everybody and their mother knew that Ukraine wasn't going to win a damn thing. The people who were giving Ukraine the weapons, they knew that Ukraine wasn't going to win. All the policy lunatics, all the policy people, they all knew that Ukraine wasn't going to win. So everyone knows that Ukraine wasn't going to win. Is it a cruel thing to tell Ukrainians that they can win? Yeah, it is. I kind of feel bad for them, I'm not going to lie. I do. I hate seeing human suffering. It doesn't matter what nationality they are. I don't like seeing human suffering. The whole thing with helping Ukraine had nothing to do with this idea that Ukraine was going to win. They all knew that Ukraine was going to lose. The purpose of helping Ukraine was to drain the capacity of the Russians. That's what it was about. It was to drain the military capacity of the Russians, force the Russians to drain manpower in Ukraine. And that way, Turkey now has the opportunity to start expanding more into Syria, backing proxies against Russia's allies. Israel can bomb the shit out of Lebanon, can strike Iran and all that stuff. Russia's not going to do a damn thing because they can't. It's in no position to do so. And is Russia now going to get into a major military conflict with a major Black Sea power that has a naval presence in the Black Sea, that has a military presence in the South Caucasus, that has a major military presence in Syria, that has a major naval presence in the Eastern Mediterranean, that also has a major military presence in Libya, and now in Somalia? I mean, Turkey is really leveraging its power. And so, I mean, Turkey is difficult enough for Russia to deal with. So it's just not. Russia is in a weak position right now. Yes, it's winning in Ukraine, but it's losing. At least now, it's losing sort of in its geopolitical war. I'm afraid that's what at least that's what I'm seeing. I could be wrong, but at least that's what I'm seeing here. That yeah, you're winning, but your ally Armenia lost. Your ally Iran is losing. Your ally Hezbollah is losing. Your ally Syria is losing right now. But we have yet to see. Let's hold our horses here. Let's have some hope here that the Assad regime is going to win. I don't want to see the Assad regime lose, because I know that if the Assad regime loses, that is a victory for the Islamists. And if we are going to be consistent, because there's a lot of sycophants out there who sit there and say, we have to fight Islamic terrorism, and that means supporting Israel, and the whole anti-Islam movement is really just Zionism. That's all it is. It's just a way to promote Zionism, because they'll sit there and tell you to support Israel to fight against terrorism, but these same bastards will also tell you to support the rebels against Bashar al-Assad, and these same bastards will tell you that we should be supporting the Azeris to butcher the Armenians. So really, who's pro-Islam here? Who's anti-Islam here? Are you guys really anti-Islam, or do you only use anti-Islam to get people to support Israel, while at the same time supporting Muslim violence when it's to the advantage of your imperialist ends? Which one is it, Mr. Homosexual NATOist? Which one is it? So it's a bunch of garbage. All of this anti-Islam stuff is a big charade. It's a big facade that's used to cover up for Zionist interest. That's all it is. Because the Zionists will support Islamists when it's to their advantage. That's why they gave billions of dollars to Hamas. Now, they couldn't ship cookies into the West Bank because they were supposedly using cookies to make bombs. And so they don't mind starving people in the West Bank, or they don't mind preventing Palestinians from getting cookies, but they'll send billions of dollars to support terrorists in Gaza, because the existence of terrorism, this is the reality here, and I'm sure all of you guys already know this, but I'm going to remind you because it's Christmas and this is the season of giving. I'm going to let you guys in on something here. The whole anti-Islam thing is a charade, and people use the anti-Islam thing to support certain policies. And the existence of Islamic terrorism is something that a lot of governments want, right? Supposedly it was the worst thing in the world. Islamic terrorism, the biggest threat to humanity. It was the biggest existential threat on the face of the planet. Fucking Michelangelo never foresaw anything like this. Joan of Arc couldn't foresee this sort of thing. The plagues that came in, the black plagues that hit Europe in the Middle Ages, was nothing in comparison to Osama bin Laden. But the reality is that a lot of these big governments, they want Islamic terrorism because it gives a reason to exist for them. Do you see what I'm saying? So Netanyahu, he needs terrorism. He does. I know it sounds like a very simplistic thing to say, but it really is that simple. He needs terrorism. Because if there is no terrorism, there is no Netanyahu. Why would they vote for Netanyahu? They're just going to vote, the Israelis would just vote for some moderate liberal. They're not going to vote for Netanyahu. But if you have Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran and Syria and all the we're surrounded. Oh, poor Israel. We're surrounded by these big bad enemies, these boogeymen. We're such Victims all the time. We have to vote for the big man, Netanyahu. That's all it is. So if Hamas is there, then we're going to vote for Netanyahu because Hamas wants to kill us. So Netanyahu is giving billions of dollars to these terrorists in Gaza, and he says we got to do a blockade on them because, they're all barbarians. So we're going to blockade food. We're going to block cookies. They can't get sugar. They can't get baby chickens, because chickens are a weapon of mass destruction. God knows. Maybe the Gazans are going to, I don't know, maybe they're going to extract some horrendously deadly avian bird flu from chickens and annihilate everybody on Earth. So we can't allow them to get baby chicks. But damn it, we're going to send billions of dollars to Gaza. Why? Because we need Hamas. Because if they exist, we exist. They feed off each other. The terrorist and the nationalist, the terrorist and the populist, the terrorist and the imperialist, the expansionist, the neocon, the neoliberal, whatever they are, the NATOist, they exist. And they justify their existence by pointing to terrorism. And so they say, we have terrorists here, therefore you need to vote for us. And that's the bottom line right there. That is the bottom line. And a lot of the people who were involved in this anti-Muslim movement were at one point in time major voices in the Cold War, and they were backing the reunification of Germany and the remilitarization of Germany. You can look into Frank Gaffney. Frank Gaffney was one of the biggest voices behind what is known as the counter-jihad movement, which formed back in the early 2000s, not too long after 9/11. And the counter-jihad movement is this big anti-Islam movement. It's still around, but it's sort of metastasized into different things. It's sort of metastasized into the ultranationalism that we see in various parts of Europe. And Frank Gaffney was a big Cold Warrior back in the day, and if you look him up, you'll find him. You'll find that he was totally in favor for allowing the Germans to revive their military strength, and he was very anti-Russia. Now, why would people be against Muslims, but they're for the reunification of Germany and they're for the remilitarization of Germany? I don't know. It's very fascinating because of the existence of migrants from the Islamic world. Nazis became popular again in Germany. That's why people voted for the AfD. And now you have Nazis being some of the most popular politicians in Germany. And with the popularity of these people, these very nationalists are talking about making Germany a super military power again. And they want to bring back German militarism. They want to bring back obligatory conscription, military conscription. They want a complete revival of German nationalism and German militarism. And if such a monster comes back into existence, the Americans will want it to come into existence. They will want it to exist. For what reason? It's very simple. To use Nazis as a proxy against the Russians. That's why. That's why. And I have a suspicion that this migrant crisis was allowed so as to make a nationalist revival, so as to spark a militarist revival, to use European militarists as proxies against the Russians. I could be wrong, but that's what I suspect. I think the British at one point in time liked Hitler because they thought they could use Hitler as a proxy against the Soviets. Skyrim, exploding chickens, is known terrorist weapon in the gaming community. Oh, damn, that's crazy. You need to remember that Vladimir Putin paying pensions for a large community of Russian whatever. I don't know. I never heard about that. I'll have to look into that one. Using Ukraine to dump old military supplies so they can get the new ones. That's also very true. Yep, they want to dump the old shit and say we're going to build some new shit. Why did Turkey take in 1.5 million Syrian refugees? I think it's because Erdogan is a Muslim and he's an Islamist and he wants to help his fellow Muslims. That's the simple explanation. Who knows what else is going on behind the curtains? So let me just remind people that in 2021, Hayat al-Tahrir al-Sham, the terrorist group that is trying to invade Syria and overthrow Bashar al-Assad, is a proxy of Turkey. And at one point in time, they were planning on creating government councils in Syria that would have been linked to the Turkish government. So these are Turkish proxies. So it says here that in the education center, so this is more evidence of Turkish expansionism and more evidence of the revival of the Turkish Empire. In the education sector, Ankara is heavily investing in Turkifying the younger generation. The curriculum in the occupied Syrian territories was adjusted to replace the phrase Ottoman occupation of the region with Ottoman rule. Let's read that one again. This is quite shocking. The curriculum in the occupied Syrian territories was adjusted to replace the phrase Ottoman occupation of the region with Ottoman rule. So they're already saying we got Ottoman rule in Syria. It is now compulsory to learn Turkish. Tell me this is not expansionism. Tell me this is not the revival of the Turkish Empire. It is now compulsory to learn Turkish in about 500 schools, encompassing hundreds of thousands of students in the primary and secondary levels. To intensify their Turkification policy, the Turks opened a primary school in Al-Dab, dubbed Martyr Major Bülent El-Bayrak, after an army officer who was killed in action in the city. What else do we got here? So far, the Turkish-controlled areas in Syria have functioned as a line of demarcation between Turkey and the territories controlled by the Assad regime. So there you go. They've already expanded their borders. This is an expansion of Turkish borders. They are not yet officially considered Turkish territory, but at the same time, they are no longer affiliated with Damascus. So this is Turkish territory. The ultimate target of Ankara's demographic change strategy could be to make the Turkish-controlled areas a natural extension of southern Turkey. That's exactly right. Russia is very powerful. And so if Turkey wants to revive its empire, Russia will be a hindrance. If Turkey, let's say, wants to control Syria, Russia's going to be there. If Turkey wants to control, let's say, the Black Sea, Russia's going to be there. If Turkey wants to, let's say, be in a competition with Iran, that's a Russian ally. Russia's going to be there. If Turkey wants to control, let's say, the Mediterranean, well, Mediterranean is a very important maritime region. Russia's going to be there. So Russia, it's the same reason why Germany went to war against Russia in World War I and in World War II. Russia's always been that big obstacle in Europe, in the Middle East, in the Mediterranean, if you want to make your own empire. I think there's also a spiritual aspect to this as well. You have a lot of people in the NATO world who are pro-homosexual, pro-Sodom, and so they will hate on any country that is anti-Sodom because they are part of Sodom. Serbia is a country that is, generally speaking, very much against the Sodom agenda, and so that's why they try to force Serbia to do Sodom weddings. Poland is very anti-Sodom. It's a very anti-Sodom country, and the Germans hate Poland. Have you guys ever looked into this? There's a lot of tensions between Poland and Germany, and that's been going on for years now. I mean, it goes without saying, right? I mean, look at what happened in World War II and all that. But you would think, okay, World War II was 80-something years ago. Poland and Germany should be friends. But they're not friends at all. They actually are at odds with each other. And it's not just over... from what I understand, it's over moral differences. It's over moral differences, as far as I know, because Poland effectively banned abortion, and the Germans said, "Oh well, you guys are becoming far right, and that's not right." And well, it is right. And then Poland said, "Okay, we don't want the gay agenda in our country." And the Germans said, "Oh, you guys can't do that, blah, 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 that's not good, blah, blah, blah." And so the Poles, they began to do this thing with their judiciary. I don't know if you guys ever looked into this, but the Polish government basically said, okay, we got our own Supreme Court, and our Supreme Court is filled with liberals. So Poland basically did just a massive overhaul of its Supreme Court. They said, okay, we're going to lower the retirement age for Supreme Court judges. So they lowered the retirement age, and they said, okay, you guys are way too old to be judging anybody. Go into retirement. And they forced a whole bunch of judges into retirement. And so the Germans got upset by this, and they said, you guys can't do that. You guys are attacking your judicial system. Your judiciary needs to be following the rules of the EU when it comes to governing a judicial court, a Supreme Court. And Poland has told the Germans that they're not going to do that. And the Germans said that your judicial court system, your Supreme Court system, needs to follow the rules of the EU when it comes to judicial branches of government. And the Poles said, no, we're not going to do that. So there has been this strong tension between the Germans and the Poles. And who knows, maybe one day we'll see the Germans fighting the Poles again, like they did in the past. Wouldn't be surprising at all. But there's some more stuff that I want to show you guys here. I mean, this is a readathon, guys. Most violent jihadist movement becomes national force as Syria stands between enemies in the forms of friends. There's some parts of the article here that I want to read to you guys. They're quite telling. So it says here that the writer Hassan narrates how Hayat Tahrir al-Sham reached the position of stability after it emerged as a branch of ISIS. All right, we all know about ISIS. They were, beheading people, burning people alive, raping people, hanging people by meat hooks and slicing them up and all sorts of serial killer shit. So HTS, which sounds like an STD, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, they have reached, so they're really just an extension of ISIS. They are a continuation of ISIS. They have their roots in ISIS. But now they want you to think that they're the good guys and they're friendly and they're the nicest people in the world. In reality, they're just demons. And it says here that the HTS became the dominant force in northwestern Syria, one of the areas not controlled by the Syrian government, according to the writer. It has tried to show its moderation by adopting less harsh Islamic practices and attracting technicians and specialists. The group has shown greater discipline than other nationalist groups. These aren't really nationalists, by the way. They're Islamists. Urging its fighters to respect Christians and other minorities. That's a bunch of bullshit. It may be true that they're saying that, but if they take power, they're not going to be nice to Christians at all. They're going to want to implement Sharia law. That's what these people want. So it says here, and meeting with religious leaders to ensure their protection. It has also played a vital role in fighting ISIS and eliminating the remnants of Al-Qaeda. Right, because they want to be Al-Qaeda. Oh, look, they're fighting Al-Qaeda. They're the good guys. Yeah, because they want to be Al-Qaeda. And this whole thing about being nice to Christians, that just means paying the jizya tax. They've already told the religious leaders, listen, you're going to give us money, all right? So they're already doing their extortionist. However, the writer believes that this shift is not a lesser step, but rather makes it more complex and difficult to eliminate. That's very true, because now, oh wow, they're a moderate group. So that means that they can't be negotiated with. So that means that you could see one day mainstream governments working with these rebels and then saying, well, we can work with them because they're moderates, like the Taliban. That's what the Taliban did. The Taliban became more professional. The Taliban became more diplomatic, more political, and so it gave the Taliban legitimacy. And Afghanistan is still under the control of the Taliban after a 20-year war, which was meant to overthrow the Taliban. The Taliban is now in power. Isn't that bullshit or what? After spending $1 trillion in Afghanistan, after so many American soldiers were killed there, after all this war, this bullshit war, what was the end? The end was the Taliban are running Afghanistan, and how many parents lost their sons? How many parents lost a son in Afghanistan? And for what? For the Taliban to go right back in there. So, I don't know, people are shocked that people don't want to join the military. And all these NATOists are shocked that people don't want to join the military. And all these NATOists are shocked that now you see massive amounts of people following populist parties and populist politicians. I don't know why they're shocked. Don't act stupid. Don't pretend to be stupid. Don't act like you don't know why people hate you. This is one of the major reasons why people hate you. Because you pulled bullshit off like that. We'll just go to war in Afghanistan. Thousands of Americans will die. We'll tell their parents that they died for their country, so they're fine. And then in the end, we're going to make a deal with the Taliban. Brilliant. So this is what this HTS group is trying to do, though. They're trying to have this appearance of legitimacy so that now major governments like Turkey will come out and say, well, we can work with them. And that makes them even more dangerous. If they're just wandering around like ISIS and just beheading people, then no government has an excuse to be diplomatic with them, at least not openly. And then the only response that would be acceptable would be to say that these people need to be destroyed. But if they're moderates and they're fighting Bashar al-Assad, which is an enemy of NATO, then they now have an appearance of legitimacy, and that's what makes them more dangerous. So this author, he says here that this HTS group will work to implement its policies through intimidation, assassination, and killing of civilian activists. And they're going to kill more than that. If they take power, they'll go after the Christians. They'll go after other people. They'll go after Shiites. They'll go after Alawites. Because they're bloodthirsty. While Syrians expect repressive practices from this group, according to the writer, Hassan says that these groups do not pose the same threat that the United States fought under its so-called war on terror, but rather he sees them as movements that have reshaped themselves as national movements focused on local issues and not just to survive, but to thrive in the new geopolitical landscape. In other words, they're more politically savvy. And so the Americans will use that as an excuse to say, well, maybe we can work with them. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if it did. In this context, the writer reads previous statements by the leader of the organization, Abu Muhammad al-Julani, in which he said, Syria will not be a base for jihadist attacks against the West. Oh, wow. Why is he saying that? Why is the leader of HTS saying that he won't be an enemy of the West? And why do you see now Syrian rebels saying that they want to be nice with Israel? Because they want the support of NATO, because they are NATO proxies. He comments on these statements by saying that the group made great efforts to indicate that it is not in conflict with the United States and that it presented itself as a reliable partner for Turkey. Ooh. So this terrorist group that Turkey says it has nothing to do with has stated explicitly that it is a reliable partner for Turkey. Confirmation right there. You heard it from the horse's mouth. He says it is capable of being a permanent force in Syria as the Taliban did in Afghanistan. Oh, so they're taking their inspiration from the Taliban because the Taliban said, hey, we don't have to be these raving lunatics anymore. We can just be very diplomatic, and then people will be open to working with us. So they learned from the Taliban. As the United States shifts its priorities, now this is very interesting. That's why I highlighted it in red. As the United States shifts its priorities towards competition between major powers like China, it is leaving the Middle East behind as groups like HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Shams, are no longer seen by regional peoples and states as terrorist groups, but as political actors filling the void left by failed states. So the Americans, and I've said this a million times, the Americans want to focus on China, and I'll talk more about that later. They want to focus on China. So they're going to say, okay, Europe, you're going to deal with Ukraine. Europe means really Germany, because Germany is the most powerful country in Europe. Germany, you're going to deal with Ukraine. And these terrorists in Syria, they seem pretty cool. They're anti-Assad, we're anti-Assad. They're anti-Hezbollah, we're anti-Hezbollah. They're anti-Iran, we're anti-Iran. And they seem very diplomatic. We don't really see them cutting a whole lot of people's heads off. And Turkey, you work with them. You're our guy. And that's what you're going to see. We don't have to be the crazy lunatics. We can be the regular lunatics, exactly. And I think that's basically what we're going to get for the future. The author of the article, ISIS, Inside the Army of Terror, believes that the goal of these groups are no longer about global jihad, but rather regional dominance, a strategy that makes them difficult to dislodge. Absolutely. Noting that it is a new reality that policymakers in the West must deal with. So it says here that the writer, Hassan concludes his article by pointing out that Western countries now face two options, the first of which is to create a moderate alternative that can govern effectively, and this requires a long-term international construction project that the United States, focused on China, may be unable or unwilling to implement. So they want to be more moderate, and the reason why they want to be more moderate is not because they want to be more moderate, it's because they want to look legitimate. So then the first world has an excuse to work with them. That's just the bottom line. That's what it is. So now Turkey will say, well, we're going to work with them. And then they'll say, well, that's fine. because they're moderates. That's fine. Turkey, you deal with it. And America is going to enable the expansion of Turkish power. That's what it is. That's what this is all about. So it says here that the article focuses on the fact that Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has been able to maintain control over most Syrian cities, and this is to the ire of the Americans. The Americans are very angry because they thought that they could easily overthrow Bashar al-Assad, and that was over 10 years ago, and they weren't able to do it because of Russia's help. Well, they got the Russians to get provoked and invade Ukraine, and I think that's exactly what NATO wanted. I think they knew that Ukraine was going to lose. I think this is exactly what NATO wanted, because now Russia is occupied with Ukraine. And sure, we know the Ukrainians are going to lose. We don't care. We don't give a shit about the Ukrainians. What matters is that a lot of Russians have been killed, and Russia is being drained of its manpower, drained of its soldiers, and Russia is occupied with Ukraine. That means we can do what we want in Syria. We don't have to worry too much about Russia. I think this is the strategy here. They really want to get rid of that Bashar al-Assad guy. They got to get rid of him, enable Turkish expansionism, and that'll expand NATO. Turkish expansionism, by the way, is NATO expansionism, because Turkey is a major member of NATO. But now that Russia is in Ukraine, Russian support is weakened. The writer says that some moderate Arab regimes, in parallel with covert support from Israel and the United States, were seeking to separate him from his Iranian sponsors. So Israel does have a hand on it, according to this author, Max Boot. In the context of the analysis, the writer believes that Bashar al-Assad has always relied on external support to stay in power, but in recent months, the power of all his main supporters has weakened. He pointed to the heavy losses that Russia is suffering in Ukraine. In addition to Hezbollah's losses against Israel, Iran also suffers from a weak economy and the high cost of waging a multi-front battle against Israel. Israel is behind this, America is behind it, Turkey's behind it, the whole damn gang is behind it. So it says here that the Turkmen assembly in Syria, which are just proxies of Turkey, is also thought to be linked to the ultra-nationalist Grey Wolves movement in Turkey. So the Grey Wolf movement is involved in Syria. Now the Grey Wolves, for those of you who don't know, they're a Turkish Nazi group. They are a racist Turkish militant organization, and they are heavily connected to Turkish intelligence, and they're also heavily connected to the CIA. The Turks used the Grey Wolves as a proxy in Turkey during the Cold War, because the United States wanted Turkish nationalism, because with Turkish nationalism you could use Turkish nationalism as a weapon against the Soviet Union. So the CIA was very interested in working with these Turkish nationalists. And it says here, in the late 1970s, former military prosecutor and Turkish Supreme Court Justice Emin Decir documented collaboration between the Grey Wolves, the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, and counter-guerrilla, the Turkish stay-behind anti-communist organization organized under NATO's Operation Gladio. Gladio was all about the CIA and other Western intelligence agencies supporting these right-wing groups, backing them, giving them weapons, so as to use them as a secret army in the case of a Soviet invasion of Europe. That's what it was. You can look into it. It's all very real. It's not a conspiracy theory. So it says here that a plan for guerrilla warfare in case of a communist takeover. So the CIA was worried about communists taking over Turkey, so they backed the Grey Wolves. And if you read about the ideology of the Grey Wolves, it is straight up neo-Nazism. It's Turkish neo-Nazism. While according to... Okay, hold on. It says here, Martin Lee writes that this mic is too loud. Martin Lee writes that the counter-guerrilla supplied weapons to the Grey Wolves, while according to Tim Jacoby, the CIA transferred guns and explosives to Grey Wolves units through an agent in the 1970s. So the fact that you see the Grey Wolves getting involved in Syria, that's CIA. Those guys are CIA proxies. In 2008, the Ergenekon trials, a court document revealed that the National Intelligence Organization, Turkish intelligence, armed and funded Grey Wolves members to carry out political murders. They mostly targeted members of the Armenian Secret Army for the Liberation of Armenia, which attacked Turkish embassies abroad in retaliation for the Turkish state's continued denial of the Armenian genocide. The Turkish intelligence services also made use of the Grey Wolves in the Kurdish-Turkish conflict, which is in Syria, by offering them amnesty for their crimes in exchange. In 2018, the AK party formed an alliance with the MHP, which is a nationalist party, which succeeded in re-electing President Erdogan. In 2022, concerns around the close connections between the Turkish government and the Grey Wolves caused the Foreign Affairs Committee of the European Parliament to recommend that the Grey Wolves be banned in the European Union. So the fact that you have Grey Wolves working in Syria, that's a sign of CIA work over there, and it's a sign of NATO being involved over there.